I'm creating something that I would want to stand up in any gallery within the world. And the pieces, the materials that were used were very expensive. 24 karat gold. I remember having this conversation on the phone with them, like, do you want fake gold or 24 karat gold? I'm like, who would pick fake gold? I cannot honestly say to something like, oh, is this real gold? No, it's fake gold. No, it's 24 karat gold, and it turns out gold's expensive. Newsflash for everybody. And yeah, it started to spiral from that point, which were pretty early on. And the budget just, ended up doubling. Because I took a firm belief that if we're doing it, like I do with every project, if you're doing something, you either see it through and do it right, or just don't bother. The world doesn't need more kind of meh. Go and do it properly.
Welcome to the Daring Creativity Podcast, the show about daring to forever explore creativity that isn't about chasing shiny perfection. It's about showing up with all your doubts and imperfections and making them count. It's about becoming more of who you already are. My name is Radim Malinic. I'm a designer, author, and eternally curious human being. I am talking to a broad range of guests who share their stories of small actions that sparked lifetime discoveries, taking one step towards the thing that made them feel most alive. Let me begin this episode with a question. Are you ready to discover what happens when you dare to create? To kick off 2026, I'm happy to welcome back Kyle Wilkinson. Kyle is a multidisciplinary designer and the founder of House of Thrills. Kyle took on a challenge of launching his first self-initiated and self-funded pop-up exhibition titled The Clinic, and the show examined how we relate to dopamine in today's digital world. During our conversation, Kyle shared how setting a 90-day deadline pushed him to get things done, explaining why he picked the best materials, suppliers, venue, and his attention to detail. He was also honest about his budget going off track, staying up late, questioning every choice, and how he sees pressure as a privilege when working on new projects. It's my pleasure to share with you my conversation with Kyle Wilkinson. Kyle, how are you doing, mate? It's great to see you again.
Now then, mate, I'm very well, thank you. Very well. How are you?
Yeah, I'm grand. Welcome to 2026. How was your Christmas?
Oh, great. Full of mince pies, full of beer. The usual, standard issue.
You've had a busy year. Especially Q3, summer, autumn.
It were pretty hectic. Yeah, one of the biggest time pressures I think I've put myself in my entire career. Yeah, so it were an interest.
That's exactly the reason why I wanted to have you back, because we were going to celebrate you being the guest number 1 and a guest number 98. But it's great to have you back to put focus on your version of daring creativity and how we do that forever, because what you created with the latest pop-up, what you've created with House of Thrills, it's been incredible, and the show is about pursuing one thing that you would otherwise regret not starting. And you are absolutely one of the people, if not one of the very few people doing it right now, building potentially the next, building your future, building something that it's of your own and something that no one's asked you to do. And it's taken a lot of effort, energy, money, resources to do. Oh my God. I mean, I hope that you are proud of what you created, because it's been quite something to watch. So let's rewind it to the moment when you realized, okay, I'm going to do something quite as important as a pop-up in 90 days.
Yeah, so I mean, the whole journey of House of Thrills so far has been a little sidestep away from my other studio. And I always wanted to bring something to the world that people could visit, because I think with House of Thrills, what I'm trying to build is a creative world and a sandbox that allows me to play in, but is a place that can provide art and design to the wider community that might not necessarily go to a space like an art gallery. And the reason for that is they're often put off because of the atmosphere that they have, or that they're almost slammed for not understanding the pieces that are on the wall. And what I'm trying to build with House of Thrills is an alternative option to that. And I decided early on that it needed to have our space at some point, and that'd be our pop-up. But earlier on in the year, I went all in on it and said, right, we need to do this. It needs to be before the end of the year. And I didn't want to hit the Christmas madness that November and December brings. So it had to be before October. This was back in, I think, June, July. And I made that decision and then went all in 90 days to come up with a concept, find the space, create the artwork, and then promote it and actually get people to it. Yeah. So it turns out 90 days is not a very long time.
Yeah. So that moment when you decided, okay, this is going to be 90 days, this is going to be a show and I need to work it all out. What was that drive behind it?
Yeah, I think it's a mechanism that I've used a few times in my career, that I think the creative sector is rife with ideas that never come to life. Everybody has them, but then bringing them to life, as we know, and executing them is the most difficult part of the ideation process. And throughout my career, what I've tried to do is put these constraints on these things so that you have to get yourself out of them scenarios. And I think I've given examples of that on various parts of my career where I've done things that I've never done before for clients and for projects, that the idea is grounded in logic and it's a good idea and actually that is the right idea, but the execution side of it is a little bit of an unknown, an impossibility. But I do have a strong belief in that if you put yourself under that pressure, you will find a way out of it. I liken it to this career and this industry and life for a generalization is almost like a rainforest. It's a very busy and crowded space. And you've got to be willing to put yourself into kind of them dark spots, them unknown spots, and sit within that dark space for a little bit to reach above the canopy to the light and grow out of that problem that you've got, that you don't necessarily know how to do it. And that's my philosophy on creativity, is that not necessarily just resting on what you know, that you've got to be willing to sit in them shadows for a little while to then grow to that next level. And that's exactly what I did with this, is giving yourself that 90-day constraint. Whilst I didn't know whether or not it were going to work out, I knew I'd have something at the end of it. And then you work and strive to make it the very best it can possibly be. And that doesn't come without its toll. It was a lot of time and it was a lot of effort. But I think the result of it gave me something of a springboard to get onto version 2 and the next event and the next thing, because we sometimes build these things up into big ta-da moments in our careers, that this one thing is going to be that detonation point that's going to send us into the stratosphere. And I don't think that's really ever the case. It can be in few isolated situations, but the majority is that compounding effect of momentum and doing things. And that's why I wanted to put a time constraint on it.
What you said really beautifully is that the industry is full of ideas that never happen, but you create that urgency for yourself, because how many times it's so easy to just give yourself another month, another week, another year, another this, another that, right? So in a sense of urgency that you created for yourself, did it come with regrets? Did it come with, oh shit, what have I done? Why?
I think it does in the moment. It's easy to say with hindsight that no, but in the moment, yeah, there were certainly points where I regretted even doing it or questioned whether or not I were doing the right thing. And I think that's only a certain response to something like this, because the time constraint is one thing, but then the financial implications of it as well is when you're putting your own money into something that effectively is not guaranteed a return and wasn't really planned to have a return from a start. This was a brand activation, so to speak. So when you're putting your own money into it and you're thinking, I am turning down projects, I'm turning down work to work on this thing, and at the same time setting fire to a bank account, is this the correct thing to do? And then at points you do regret it when there's a little curveball in the road that costs more money and costs more time than you anticipated. You go, shit, why am I doing it? How do I get out of this? But that's just another level of pressure that allows you to not stop, not give up like you often do with it. Like it's so easily to give up. There is no way through this apart from forward and absolutely smashing it. And that's not easy though. That it comes with a mental pressure and an emotional toll.
You've held yourself publicly accountable because you've made it very well documented about what you're doing, how you're doing it, how soon it's coming. But I'm realizing that for those who may have not seen your show or potentially have seen you documenting what you've done, let's put a bit more color into the concept of what you actually created. Like, what was the show about and why did you even settle on that theme?
Yeah, so the whole premise of the show is around our addiction to dopamine and social media and validation. I wanted to pick a thing that we could. The work that I create is predominantly pop art, but I do want some of the work to have a satirical edge, because then it allows it to have depth and social commentary. And it felt really pertinent for the time. And I wanted to create something with House of Thrills that these are chapters of work and bodies of work that can be different from each iteration. And in this one, I wanted to create a world that is a little bit more accessible from an artistic standpoint. So it's not just about coming in, chin rubbing, looking at a canvas on a wall and pondering over something deep and meaningful. Obviously, you can do that if you want to, and that's how you enjoy it. But for a lot of people, they don't go into galleries because they're scared of not understanding something and then being judged upon that. So I wanted to build a world where it felt fun and accessible, so that if you liked the work or didn't like the work on the wall, you could still leave saying you had a good time. And that was the whole premise. So linking this subject matter of dopamine and validation and addiction to new things that we don't necessarily notice that are addictions and damaging. We've got large graphic works of medicine and pills and a skull that's got heart eyes that's called Like to Death. But packaged up in that is the gallery's themed like a pharmacy with nurses that greet you at the door and check you in and put a medical wristband on you and make it a little bit more immersive as an experience. So it's not just coming into a silent white walled room and then go and figure it out for yourself. It's a little bit more, you do literally go on a little bit of an experience and a journey within the show. So,
well, it's really interesting because obviously I know the theme, and obviously we talked about it prior to the launch about how is it social commentary, and it was just now when I actually realized there's another layer to this, because dopamine is such an important part of creative life. Not it's just a social commentary. Like we've created outside sources of dopamine. Obviously, we are very well, what's the right word to use? We are very well responsible for the levels of dopamine that we can actually administer to ourselves by creating work, by creating things that make us feel alive, make us feel like we got a sense of growth and a sense of accomplishment. So did you feel your own levels of dopamine and cortisol rising from?
yeah, I recognize it within myself is that I'm somebody that chases that hit, but through different kind of formats. The minute the social media is the one that provides that instant thing to a lot of people, and it doesn't give much depth or kind of reward beyond that instant gratification. But I do realize that part of this show has an irony to it, given that I was sharing the majority of the journey on social media, and the fact that part of it is me chasing down another dopamine hit of whatever that achievement is in my career and the work and building something. And that is what I constantly chase, is that next thing, which is in part tied to a huge dopamine hit, because it is rewarding when you do these things. And, the adrenaline and cortisol that keep you awake at 3 o'clock in the morning, worrying about all the little intricacies of the show. And is something going to turn up on time? Is this going to work? How do we do that? What's the logistics look like? All them things are things that I know that puts me in the best possible situation to create. I know that it doesn't do for others, for some others anyway, but the situation that I put myself in regularly is I know that that's the best way of me working, even though it's not necessarily the most pleasurable at times. But yeah.
Is there an underlying thing with dopamine? Because if I take House of Thrills, is there dopamine in there? Or was it just something that sparked your imagination and thought like, okay, I'm going to create a show about dopamine?
I think you can draw the parallels between the two, being dopamine providing that hit and excitement and House of Thrills. But really there were no joining of the dots in that situation. It was just purely, what idea have we got that we can expand upon a multiple pieces of work, as well as bring and build into a world that we can theme it as a shop rather than a gallery. So it has a little bit more of a pop-up shop vibe as opposed to a gallery vibe, and then give me something that can be built into a world of the kind of how we promote that through the medical themes. So we've got elements of me in a medical gown within the promo. We've got the Kerry, the face of the clinic, which is what the show was called, with she's a model and actress that I photographed so that we could use her as the face of the show. And what that allows is it becomes its own brand of IP, so that the clinic is one show from House of Thrills. And then I can then build that world and pop that up in various locations. And then that can be its own idea and its own living ecosystem as a thing. And that's what I wanted to do. And the clinic and the whole theme felt like the most topical of the time amongst all the other ideas that I'd got kicking about. So I went down that road. But that were a difficult choice because obviously the other ideas that I've got, I still think that they're valid and good and they're going to come in future. But they're something that can be built upon. But it's just something that I felt could be more on of its time in 2025.
I'm going to tweak your quote from earlier. It says ideas that never happen. This is ideas that will definitely happen. But before we get onto the dopamine as an outcome of your work, let's talk about the cortisol and stress and planning, because it takes a lot of self-discipline. You made a noise about it saying, hey, this is what I'm doing. And in some way, I think it's a fantastic way of like not having anywhere to hide makes you get that thing done, right? How did you stop yourself from freaking out and going, okay, the clock is on, I've got 90 days. What the hell do I do? How do I do it?
I think you've got to bring a little bit of structure to it. So you've got to allow yourself that freedom to create, but allocate time for you to do certain tasks or try and do that, because it will always be ever evolving as a timeline, given the constraint and the pressure that's there. But what I did was block out time, saying I've got 6 weeks to do the work. I've got this to do this to do that, and then block it out where you can, and then do the logistics and break it out. Try and come up with a bit of a plan first and foremost. Unfortunately, them curveballs will come. And as an example, in this scenario, I thought I had 12 weeks to do the whole kind of design of the show, the work of the show, and I had to move the timelines. I had to sort of frame us out to get the logistics in. I would recommend anybody getting the logistics done first, because they were the thing that were the hardest. But when I phoned the framers up, the framers wanted 6 weeks. So that halved my production time instantly. And that threw a curveball and an immense amount of stress, especially when they were at the other end of the country where I were getting them done as well. So they weren't just down the road. But in terms of managing it from an emotional standpoint, I think I'm quite used to doing this, in the sense that I've through a little bit of experience and putting myself in them constant pressure situations of doing something new, I've got accustomed to doing it, which is a cheap answer. I appreciate, but I think it's just allowing yourself to freak out if you need to, and getting it out of your system. Because that's what I've done in the past, is get it out of your system, talk to your partner, talk to a friend or whoever it is. And then once you've voiced these fears, these kind of ideas, you tend to figure them out as you're voicing them and realize, actually, oh, I've come up with a plan for that already. So that's what I tend to do, is get it off your chest. It sounds so simple, but it's avoided half the time through either, if you say it out loud, it's real, or just the fear of saying it out loud in the first place. But it really does help in them scenarios, because you will just figure it out as you're talking it, and use people as a sounding board.
It also takes some time to actually get things processed in our brains and actually make sense of them. The pathways are being made as we processing things, like how we sleep on it, how we give it time to actually ferment in our brains.
That's the beauty of doing this in a short space of time, that you've always got something to do and something that is a different task. So if it's a creative thing that you're working on, that you're stuck on, put it down, walk away, pick something else up, and you will figure it out in the background. And that to me is another benefit to putting the time constraint in, is that there's no, I'll just go and sit on my ass for half a day. No, I've got to be on with something else, but it'll be a different task. So if you're just thinking about how to get a van from A to B, that is a different task to creating a piece of art. And I find that helps in that scenario of that you will use the back of your mind, or just be sat there figuring it out as you were doing a different task.
I tried to visualize it. I try to visualize it in a way that, imagine that there's a football, and there's 11 of you on the pitch of trying to achieve 11 different things. And 11 of you are like basically 11 8-year-olds playing football because they're all running to the ball at the same time. Thanks, brain. They're all running to the ball at the same time and no one's winning, no one's passing. It's just like, how do you separate and go, okay, you lot, sit down, let's divide the tasks. Let's divide like how we need to do things and then actually make a plan, because so many things come to us so complicated at first, only to realize you tell your partner, she'll be like, what are you talking about? This is all simple. What are you on about?
Yeah. And that's why, I mean, firstly, a team of 11 Kyles on a football team. Wow. What a team that would be. But I do think that you always can figure these things out, but you either give yourself too much time and you trip yourself up, or you kind of forget about it and put it off. And it's just, talk to people, figure it out, but do other things in there. Some people use running, some people use self-cycling, gym, whatever that be. Get active, get doing other things, and your brain will figure these things out.
I mean, yeah, and it's a wonderful, I think, and I've been laboring this for quite a bit, like how much more privilege or how much more rewarding that is to actually have time to think about stuff. Because again, 11 Kyles, I mean, that would be a fantastic team, if you say so. But 90 days of cortisol and eating yourself alive by making this happen and realizing you only got 6 weeks to do stuff rather than 12 weeks. How did you even set up? Like, I mean, I want to know, how did you curate the show? Because I was expecting something and I got something totally different. And I was so excited that it was so different. We'll talk about the detail and everything that you put in the show, but how did you curate it? How did you do it? Because I'm curious.
So that's what the first task of the 90 days was, to find the space first. So a lot of people would create the work and then go looking for the space. The space came first. So I decided that I wanted to do it in London pretty early on, because I think that the intention really for the brand is to build something that has scale and that has reach. And London really is the best place for that, and especially for the show. So I went looking for places that felt right and dropped on a place in Shoreditch that had it had a glass front that had a bit of a look of a medically themed place. It had a few things that I would love to have changed, but you're never going to find something that's absolutely perfect. So I went through the negotiations with the landlord first and got that over the line. Once that were done, it was then time to work on the concept and the kind of core of the body of the work. And once I got the location, I knew that I wanted to tile pieces on the wall in a certain way, so it had a look. And that allowed me to get the scale and size of each piece because I measured it to the wall. And it allows the show to be a little bit more considered. You're not just I think there's a balance to be done on this, where you've got to create something that ultimately can end up in somebody's home, because that's, you intend to sell these things, or I did anyway. So you've got to create something that's suitable for a home, but then it's suitable for the environment that it's going into to be the show, because the show is the thing that we're working on. And as I went along, I wanted to create various pieces of different sizes and scales that could go in different locations, and push myself to do different mediums as well. So the materials that were used in some of the pieces were something that I'd never used before. And that came as a result of just like working through these of, what is this piece going to be? How can we do that? One of the pieces is a giant lolly. I knew that part of the show is when you go to the clinic or when you go to the doctors, you were rewarded with a sticker, or hopefully as a kid, a lolly. And that were part of the theme, is that you would have a lolly to enjoy and like look at the work. And all these spaces became available thanks to finding that exact space that we're in London in Shoreditch.
That's a nice level of detail. I mean, because I know the venue you've chosen. I think there was a salt beef bagel, I think, in play as well in a nearby location. That is still the deal for you because it was near Brick Lane and a famous bagel shop, which, I mean, it's a legend.
It's life changing when you go there. Everybody who goes to London or doesn't live in London, go to Bagel Bake. It's life changing.
So how many bagels did you actually manage during the show?
One for breakfast, one for lunch was pretty much the standard issue. I used to get, depending on what time I got in, the beauty of that place is that it's open 24 hours. So no matter what time I got in, it were a bagel, lunch, and then depending on how late I finished, it were either
I mean, you can hear people asking. So let's go into the fillings. Is it the same one, or what did you do?
I discovered, right? I'm obviously from Yorkshire, so I'm stereotypically tight. And what I discovered is the next door did a flat white for £4, and if you go to Biglebait, you can get a coffee and a cream cheese bagel for £4. So that was breakfast, and then salt beef all day for anything beyond breakfast.
I like it because you just mentioned money and you said I'm tight, but you are not tight with the production budget, because how quickly did you realize that, in the words of Ross Kemp, it's going to kick off?
We'll be back after a quick break.
This episode is brought to you by Lux Coffee Co., the first creative specialty coffee company building a platform to shine the light on emerging global talent with a mission to make a positive impact on the creative industry and beyond. Lux Coffee Co. offers exceptional coffee sourced from around the world through ethical and sustainable practices, and you can discover the current range of signature blends and single origins, coffee hardware and accessories, along with exceptional apparel at luxcoffee.co.uk. You can use the code PODCAST to get 15% off your first order.
Already kicked off. Yeah, I think that was one of the most difficult things to get my head around. And one of the side benefits to doing this show, I wanted to get into the mindset of what it's like when a client comes to me to work on a project and they're spending their money with me. And that understanding now of putting your own money into stuff. I've put my own money into other businesses and the studio in the past, but this is slightly different because this is an unknown outcome. And very quickly, very early on, when it became the materials that I wanted to use for some of the pieces, because I'm creating something that I would want to stand up in any gallery within the world. And the pieces, the materials that were used were very expensive. 24 karat gold. I remember having this conversation on the phone where they were like, do you want fake gold or 24 karat gold? I'm like, who would pick fake gold? I cannot honestly say to something like, oh, is this real gold? No, it's fake gold. No, it's 24 karat gold. And it turns out, Radim, gold's expensive. Newsflash for everybody. And yeah, it started to spiral from that point, which were pretty early on. And the budget just, ended up doubling. Because I took a firm belief that if we're doing it like I do with every project, if you're doing something, you either see it through and do it right, or just don't bother. The world doesn't need more kind of meh. Go and do it properly. And I do believe that is the longevity to creativity, because I think there's the lower end of the market, the slot as it's now been branded, that's going to be taken over by IAI and other technologies that's going to come in. I think people are going to seek something that is a little bit more experiential and a little bit more special. So when you start layering in this thing spiraled because the material costs, but then when you're booking actors to come and work at the show, and you want the music to be right, we've got a free bar, all that kind of thing going off. It adds up, and the budget doubled. Yeah,
this is an interesting thing. Obviously, from an experience, I never thought that I would be publishing books in the way I am. I never thought that I'd be, self-publishing or creating my own publishing company and spending money on advertising. And there was this element when I realized like how much of an ambition there was and how much of a drive to make it happen, where I was at that time at 4 books. I was printing my 4th book plus the reprint of the first 3. And the printing bill was £55,000, right, for 35,000 books. Would I ever imagine that I would spend £55,000 on literally okay, there's profits from the book. I mean, it's been a highly profitable exercise for a while. And you realize like, this is astronomical figures, because I think I spent like 800 quid on my first 1,000 brochures or whatever. It did seem like a monumental spend. But again, we're talking about the fact like how everything adds up. You're not going to go and spend 55 grand on books that are not proven. You're going to go and grow little by little to get to where you need to be, because we go through this life and collect the information, influence the inspiration in form of ideas to give us a sort of experience of how to do things. Because as you said, when things started escalating really quickly, it's that sort of life and work grown resilience that and endurance that kicks in and says and realize, I want this to be good, therefore I'm going to step up. And again, being publicly accountable to this. What was the best outcome of this show? Because you're making that show only once and you put in your right foot forward, right? So I believe like when you really strive to do something mega, you always find money. You always find ways to make it happen.
There's a beauty in the naivety to things when you put yourself in a position of, I don't necessarily know what I'm doing or what I'm getting into, because I think the outcome is often better. I heard something from Noel Gallagher recently and it really hit, where he was talking about Don't Look Back in Anger. And he wrote that on a Sunday night or whatever, just picked up his guitar and wrote it. And he was saying that if he understood the enormity of that song whilst writing it, it would have never been written, because he would have put himself under too much pressure to just get it out and to get it right and to meticulously like craft every word. He just did it and then put it down, put his guitar down, and off he went to pub or whatever he did. And I think there's a beauty in that naivety and the unknown, and putting yourself in them scenarios where you can just create freely. And in my scenario is that, yes, I didn't understand getting into it, but if I'd have known at the start, oh, it's going to cost this much money, then that would have probably held me back from doing it, because I would have gone, oh shit, what if it didn't work out? Oh, this is really like too much. And you put a contingency in and then you smash through that. And it's like, oh, again, we're in a hole here. But it goes back to that earlier point of putting yourself into that hole, into that dark kind of shadowy area, to then allow yourself to grow out of it. And I really do think that I know that personally, the outcome of the show has been amazing to hear the feedback, to have the response, and that some of the conversations that I've had as a result of it are great. But personally, the growth that I've had in terms of from an emotional standpoint, going into another thing like this, I'm planning one of the next challenges for 2026. And I feel so much more at ease as a result of doing that, because I've just built that kind of emotional resilience. And I think that is so important, the resilience that we build emotionally and intellectually in a creative career, because it is difficult.
You've gone definitely the extra mile on that chapter. And I love a quote by Don Martell, and he said, "The last mile is hardly ever crowded because not many people are prepared to go that far." And it's the uncomfortable. It's the uncomfortable. Like, you're not gonna win by doing it easy. Like, we have the glorification of the final reel, of the show reel, of like, oh, how did you do that? And then you get to hear all the details about how things nearly didn't happen, how they broke, how they glued together with duct tape, not just to make the thing be together. And you realize that's what life is about, because we are aspiring to. There's definitely people. I'm sure there's people aspiring to be writing another. No, Don't Look Back in Anger, but that wasn't written in an aspiration to write Don't Look Back in Anger, as you described. That was just like, hey, I'm doing my thing. I'm here with my thoughts, and I'm doing it for myself, because ultimately that's what matters the most. I'm doing it for myself.
That's the key thing. I came to a realization when doing House of Thrills, when you splitting my time away from the other side of my creative career and life, is like, is this the right decision? And you come to a realization that if you won the lottery, what would you be doing? If you had like endless funds and endless time to be doing whatever, this is what I'd be doing. I'd be building shows and releasing products and creating things. It's exactly what I'd be doing. And I feel really privileged and lucky to be able to do that. But, I've spent years working towards to put myself in that situation. So you've got to firstly create for yourself, and then be strategic enough to be then thinking, actually, this will work for a broader audience. This can like be a brand that can be more accessible to people. You can apply some strategy and business and creative thinking to that. But first and foremost, you've got to want to pick the guitar up for yourself and sing the song or create the piece of art or whatever it be.
I love what you said earlier. It says, is the beauty and naivety, because we all find it's quite comfortable to fly the flag at the beginning and says, hey, I'm doing this stuff. It's clicking together, but I don't know what I'm doing. And you say to the room of creatives, and they're clapping like, hey, dude, you don't know what you're doing, but it's looking good. And then you get to the point of like, maybe I should know what I'm doing. Ignorance is not always the excuse for things. And I've gone to the other side of the argument thinking like, is it a cop-out for our industry? Like, are we setting ourselves for not looking professionals? Like, I don't know what I'm doing, but so thinking, you need to know what you're doing. But there is the other side of the coin is equally corrosive, because when you know too much, you're like, I need the uncomfortable. I need that unknown. I need to work it out, because like knowing the answers doesn't always spur you. If you know how to write the next "Don't Look Back in Anger," would you really write it, or would you actually try to write something different? And that's my question. Like, where is the peak in between the two sides of the coin on the edge? Going, how much do you want to know? Because the beauty and naivety is a fantastic way of being, because it actually helps you to open the doors that you didn't even know existed.
I think it comes down to adhering to your principles, that I want to create things of quality with whatever I create. And that's sector agnostic. So I think once you have that grounding root of your own kind of personal beliefs and principles within the work can then go off into any direction that you see fit or would like to search down. And for me, with creativity, especially when you get a client brief, if you know the answer at the start of the project, then you're doing it wrong, because it's not about you're not creating anything. You're just replicating something that you've done before. You're resting on your laurels. You're in a certain scenario that you know what you're doing. The whole point of creativity is to create something, to make something. And it's like knowing the answer to the jigsaw puzzle before you've started. That's not the point of the game. Point of the game is to not know what you're doing and join the dots and create the thing that is right for the setting, the project, the target audience, whatever that be. And I think that is often the thing that's lost within this sector is, do you know, it's not professional to not know what you're doing. Well, no, you're the expert that is paid to play with a blank canvas. If you put a blank piece of paper down in front of a lot of people, they freak out. Create me something. Oh, no, I can't do that. We welcome it. We go, oh, yeah, cool. What's the constraints? Where's the edges to this? Where can we go? Where can we not? And you figure it out and you put it together like a puzzle. And I think that's the answer for me is always pointing yourself in, resting on your principles and your experience, but pushing yourself out of your comfort zone to not actually know the answer and the outcome at the beginning, because you will get there.
You mentioned constraints, and there are no better constraints than the physical materials, physical exhibition, that you need to always narrow down the list of options. So you had a mixture of different pieces. So again, for those who didn't see the show online or didn't attend, you mentioned frames, and you mentioned framers on the other side of the country. So I would like to know why you've chosen them. But what was the whole sort of idea behind the eclecticness of the show that had so many varied pieces tied together with one theme? But how did you decide on, what these pieces would be? Why would you spend money on 24? I mean, you told us why would you spend money on 24 karat gold, but there were other elements that elevated the show. So yeah, constraints, suppliers, decisions, and limitations, potentially financial and even material, resourceful.
I wanted a body of work that could feel cohesive, but that had that kind of, oh, I like this, but I don't like that one, but I'm interested in this. And what is this? And bringing my interest into bringing physical products to life, as well as something that we're more traditionally used to having a piece of paper to play with, or a canvas. So I created these wooden dopamine sculptures they were very testing to do in that time frame, but I wanted to represent our addiction to dopamine in this. I called it super dope, and it's like one of them is a 50 centimeter in diameter dopamine pill that has that kind of depth to it, where it's called the big red pill, which is linked to the Matrix. A few people picked up on it, but the idea is that you're stepping into a world where we've got all these little boxes of likes and filters and dopamine. So it brings together my experience in graphic design, in branding, in the physical products that I've made, in the chairs and the lighting that I've done in the past. It brings together all these skills that I've stacked over the years that I wanted to deploy. So it's not restricting myself to one medium is what I wanted to do with the show, because I felt as though that makes it more immersive. It makes it more accessible for people that might like a particular thing, i.e. if you like sculpture, if you like pieces on the wall. The frames, that were purely a quality choice. The framers that I used to frame in people like Julian Opie's work, and and Bella Freud's. These are people that I look up to, and if I'm going to get to that level, then why not play at that level at the very beginning? And so I sourced them the very best things that I could use to then use at my disposal, so that I can create the best possible product within the time frame and within obviously budget restraints, because that does come into it. And then the materials used were both a creative decision. So it wasn't just banging 24 karat gold on these things. 24 karat gold is a link to the depth to the work. So we're all lusting after likes and validation and dopamine and all these things that we seek. These are the dopamine element is the new shiny magpie, the thing that we magpie towards, which is traditionally 24 karat gold within society. We look at this shiny thing that glistens for centuries, and we seek it and we want it, and we want it and need it in our lives. And it's kind of a depth to the work that I wanted to put in, that it's there if people want it, but also it looks cool, and it can be as shallow as that, and that you know that you've got something that's luxury.
You've summarized it really well when you say, like, you put your foot right. Obviously, you where you want to be, you play to that level. You play at high stakes game rather than let's make it work. Let's do something about it. Like whatever goes, because ultimately that level of achievement and that level of strive gets rewarded by recognition that it's. I mean, it looked established. It looked incredible, and I thought I knew what to expect, and I was beautifully surprised by getting so much more, because and that sounds weird when we say this as humans, like I didn't expect it. And that was my hit of dopamine. That was my like, oh shit. And yeah, it took me a minute to really get it. It took me a minute to absorb like how much effort's gone into it and how quickly you did all of it. And the level of detail that you put into this was astounding, because I've only like discovered some of the details from the photos afterwards, because it's a melee, right? Obviously it's a show, obviously lots of people, some people travel from Scotland and far apart. Like it was incredible to see how you brought people together and in our community, but it was some of the things that are so thought out, so well executed. And because they are just a tiny detail, but a really important detail. Like, oh, it took me like a second time to relive the show and going like, oh, that's what it all was. That was incredible. So yeah, I mean, to have that detail that you've put into it, you've written all the copy, like you've created, like it was established. I mean, that sounds silly to say that, but like it wasn't a half-assed effort. It was like it was playing a high-stakes game, and whatever you do with it next, it's already standing on really tall legs rather than trying to walk. And yeah, it's as you can tell, I'm so happy. I'm so happy for you that that's what you did and the effort that you put into it, because you've created your own game. Like that's for sure.
Thanks, man. It does mean a lot. It's the feedback has been humbling. I never know what to do with a compliment, because you strive to do these things, and when they actually pull them off, it's always for other people to say of how good or how well they enjoyed it and how good they thought it was. So I really do appreciate it. But I do think that that's it's the immense amount of effort that went into it that paid off. And yeah, don't get me wrong, it wasn't a healthy process. It's not a healthy process to put yourself under that much pressure. I thrive on it, but it's one of those that I have propelled things and accelerated things to a certain point. And I do think that when you skill stack like this, you can create different things, because I've never wanted to niche down in my abilities. And I think that show was a representation of what you can do when you get used to like putting yourself in them uncomfortable scenarios, because all of it is not something that I've done before, but you put yourself under that. Again, coming back to that, it must be the very best I can do. And that changes and evolves, but that's grounding it in them principles that I believe in the work.
There's something magical when we can choose our own problems. To be able to choose our own problems makes you already half the level of cortisol and stress, because on client projects, you have to deal with the constraints given to you, whatever the work needs to be plugged into, whatever we need to do with it. And your skill stack, as you mentioned, is driven by their demand, by their requirements. Whereas you can choose your own skill stack. You can actually cherry pick through curiosity an obsession. Like, okay, I want to know this. I want to do this. I want to choose my own problems, because when I'm dealing with my own problems, as you say, sometimes it's unhealthy, but it's your own problems, and it makes you not hate what you do, because you're going to see it through.
And that's exactly why I think pressure is a privilege. It is ultimately you putting yourself in that position that you're under pressure, but what a situation to be in. I've put myself in a position that I can create a show in London under my own steam and do what I want with it. That's a privilege. That's amazing. It's an immense amount of pressure, of course it is, but what a ride, what an experience. And irrelevant of the outcome, the memories that are built from it and the kind of experience and emotional kind of growth from it is worth every step and every painful kind of part of the process. Thankfully, obviously, it were reasonably successful. There were no kind of measure of success on this one. It was people kept asking me, "Oh, what do you expect from this?" I'm like, no, absolutely nothing. I hope at the very best that people will turn up and they will enjoy it. That is the bare minimum. I'm not doing this as a result of do X and Y will come out of it. That weren't I think we've got to be, the kind of path that I'm on at the minute is a long-term play. And it's not something that I'm trying to build a world out with House of Thrills. That's why I've not put it under my own name. I'm trying to build a world out that I can play within. And that involves many chapters and many things that will come out of it. And this is just I've raced 90 days is to get to the starting point, get to the start line, and then start running.
What you created what I call the eternal lesson in staying present. When you don't think about what's beyond the moment, what's beyond the opening doors, like you working, you focusing, getting yourself in a state of flow, stressed state of flow, but we get in there because it's so stressful. It's the best way to be, because it's the validation. Like when we think of, and I don't think there's an episode of this podcast when I don't talk about self-acceptance as a part of creative work, because surprise, surprise, it's a chapter in a new book and talking about self-acceptance. But when you celebrate our uniqueness, when we think about like, how do you stick to your own narrative? And when you focus on your narrative, that helps you to focus on what you're doing. Because at first, when we're younger, more selfish with your ideas, egocentric, you're like, hey, do you like this? Because you need that immediate validation to say, yes, carry on. Whereas when you get much further down the road, you're like, I don't give a shit what people think, because the first person that needs to make sense to is me. And then we see what happens next, because it's not sociopathic way of working. Like, I don't care what people think, because ultimately you still will have some sort of feedback. And you said earlier that you don't know how to take a compliment, because you are still processing like how this works and what I'm doing with this and finding your own way through. So that delayed gratification, it's a skill that comes with time, because you can't learn it, you can't teach it, you can't tell people to be that. It's something that you pick up as you go.
I think it's really important. I think it's the situation that you've got to hit your own bar, set yourself that bar. Again, the principle side of it. If you hit your own bar and level of quality, then it doesn't really matter what people think. If you feel that it's the right work for you and what you're creating, I fully accept that some people come in. I have had polarizing reviews of one of the popular pieces that sold quite a few of the Giant Skull, which is called Like to Death. Somebody so beautifully described the piece of being of its time and being really has a good balance between satirical and dark humor and of its time for kind of the social commentary that it is. And they understood, they said it better than I could, and I created the piece of work. And then the other polarizing view is, why the fuck would you want a skull on your wall? And it's like, that's, both are correct. Both are valid. Both we create platforms. And this is the beauty of it. When people often ask, what do you worry about what people think about your work? And to me, it's like, we create the platform for opinion. So we create a piece of work to allow others to have an opinion. I would so much rather be on the pitch playing the game than be in the stands throwing the opinions about. I want to be on the game. I want to be on the pitch playing the game every single time. And sometimes I will play badly, or some people will think I shouldn't be playing. And that's fine, because I'm still going to play. And I think that once you hit that bar, that only comes from that kind of self-confidence. I'm not quite sure what it is, but that kind of hitting that bar of, I'm going to create this for me and hit a standard that I expect of myself. And then if that results in a positive or negative outcome, it doesn't really matter. Obviously, you're human, you want it to be positive, but it's better that you still play the game.
Well, yeah, it's interesting what you said. You're a human, you want it to be positive because positive is the positive fuel. But yeah, it's an interesting one. To stop me from thinking about 11 Kyles again, like you want to be on a pitch. 11 Kyles, back on, back on.
It brings the football pitch analogy back. But I said that more in the sense just to be, I suppose, real, is that you want a response regardless, positive or negative. But if you're going to flip a coin, which side would you rather it land on? I'd rather it land on positive. Yes, of course, because the reason why is not to give me the gratification, because it's normally, especially in the creative world, if you get a positive response for something, you get further momentum that will change your trajectory into a different project or the things going forward. If somebody constantly pans your work, then there's less likelihood of something happening going forward or other people wanting to work with that. We can question that, because I think that unfortunately is why we've got a lot of people on social media that's got clout. I'm going down a different earlier, but the social media kind of game where if you've got the kind of validation from others, that you will get the work, but they're not necessarily the right people for the work. So I understand that part of the scenario is that the people want that kind of social proof that this is good.
It made me think of something. When you put stuff out, people like it. You're thinking, oh, they like my work. They're associated with this. They may potentially understood the point. And then you meet them in a social setting and they're like, oh, is that you who did that thing? Is that you? You're like, yeah, that's me. You're thinking, it doesn't fucking matter, does it? Like people just think click, 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 carry on. Whereas it's what you did just show, like literally puts a focus and a spotlight on the fact, like how important it is to do this in public, how important it is to bring back to the values and to the experiences that we had in the past. Because yeah, it's so easy to get click, 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 click. I mean, this is a terrible thing of saying like likes and clapping hands or whatever.
That's what the show were about, in terms of not seeking out that validation, seeking validation through the people around you and the real people that's in your life, as opposed to the kind of faux shiny thing. That's why a lot of the pieces in the show had diamond dust on, is that they glint in the light and they say that you have that magpie effect where you seek out that shiny thing. And it's like just that visual reminder, a physical reminder within that you hang in your house, your flat, wherever you live, that is a reminder that the physical dopamine is so much better than the kind of online thing that we build a world in as minds to think that is actually what we want. It's very instant, but very shallow. And the whole point of House of Thrills going forward is to try and build these events that are live events that bring people within the same room. The thing that I'm most proud about with the show in particular is not doing it to the quality and all the kind of nice things that you've said and doing it in the time constraint. It's the feedback on the atmosphere within the room that I'm the most proud of, because that was the most important to me, is that you can like the work, you can hate the work. That's indifferent to me. You're entitled to that and you are correct, whichever way, but it's the atmosphere.
Yeah, dude. I mean, what you're describing is exactly what happened, and I just love that drive of what you created, and it was nice to be part of a tiny smidgen, being part of the story with partnership with Wax Coffee, where yeah, we provided hospitality. We did a collaboration on the Kiss of Life coffee, which, as you told me, was stolen quite a lot. Just this was fun to hear. But again, I think what I've been doing with my side projects and various sort of capacities is like, how do you start a thing that can be a collaboration? How can be a conversation? How can you do something? Because ultimately sitting at home and complaining that an Adobe Cloud has gone from £51 to £52 and then that's the time to cancel your subscription. Yeah, it's not a fucking point of life, is it? Like, it's like, how do you do things that you can actually inspire people, build a community and actually bring people together? It's something that we once upon a time we used to do on a regular basis, whereas now we celebrate it as something which is special. So I think what we need to do is just to carry on where we've been with the knowledge we've got now and how we do it. So Kyle, I was looking forward to this one because I knew there's so much more to talk about. This is the thing that I've been cheering you on from the sidelines and making sure that you've got the support from our side just to make sure that to get to the other side and making it happen is going to bring us so much kind of reward and relief and validation in what you created. Because through many conversations that you and I had was like, who else is doing anything like this right now in our industry? And the answer was always no one. So to put yourself out there, to spend the money, to put your, in a way, neck on the line, in a way of like setting your bank account on fire, what you're going to remember for years to come is how you made people feel in that room, what you put in that detail, which skulls are now hanging on people's walls, because too right, there should be skull on everyone's wall. So I'm a big fan. I salute you for what you're doing, and I'm so excited for 2026 and beyond for what you can create with this, because creating your universe, creating your own world is always the most satisfying thing to do. So well done.
Thanks, mate. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Daring Creativity Podcast. I'd love to know your thoughts, questions, and suggestions. So please get in touch via the email in the show notes or social channels. This episode was produced and presented by me, Radim Malinage. The audio production was done by Neil Mackay from 7 Million Bags Podcast. Thank you, and I hope to see you on the next episode. If you enjoyed this episode and would like more accessible resources to help you discover your daring creativity, you can pick up one of my books on themes of mindful creativity, creative business, branding, and graphic design. Every physical book purchase comes with a free digital bundle, including an ebook and audiobook, to make the content accessible wherever you are and whatever you do. To get 10% off your order, visit novemberuniverse.co.uk and use the code podcast. Have a look around and start living daringly.